Hi guys, how are you doing? So today I am going to be doing the same thing, working on that blanket and all that kind of fun stuff. I was supposed to start a minute ago. Sorry, it's like for some reason it's always just before I'm supposed to start that I get hollered at every single time. So sorry about that. And I'm just prepping my yarn here because the one yarn ball does not like pulling from the center, and I'm using I'll show you. I'll show you guys what I'm doing. I have the rig that my camera is on. I have it, and it's wide enough to set a binder clip on. So what I do is I put the binder clip on it, and then I have these pointed down, and I just have the yarn run through, so it gets pulled from the center of the ball straight-ish up, and ends up working that way. So it seems to work really well when it comes to that kind of stuff. So just put that back, and I'm sorry if you can hear any of that. There are people here, and I can't control any of it. So anyway, let's oops, I forgot to share it out. Tweeter. And let's see here. There it is. Like, retweet with comment. Gee whiz. There we go. And G, and there. Yay. And scroll that down. And I have to remember to tell Angie that thing. There we go. So, this is my color off today. I think it looks a bit dark, don't I? Face. Hands. There we go. And, okay. And the... Oh, yeah, we definitely want that white balance to be auto. Turn off the auto gain, though, I think. Oops, that's definitely not good. Oh, that was not good either. Oh, wow, there we go. Hey, that's a bit better. I'm liking that color better. Save. That's much better. Now I don't look yellow. So, I've almost got my, valance done up. And it's gonna look like that when it's done. I've got all these done now. So it's just a matter of, I have like the ends to sew in on a few of these, and then I'll put it up, and I'll put up a picture on my tweeter for it. And so these are the centers for the blankies. And I just need to do the other rows. So I had this piece of yarn that was extra, so I just, to keep them all in one spot, I decided to do it this way. And yeah, so let's get listening. And it's Ancient Tales and Folklore of Japan. So let's get at her.
Chapter 3 of Ancient Tales and Folklore of Japan. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David McKay. Ancient Tales and Folklore of Japan by Richard Gordon Smith. Ghost of the Violet Well. Told to me by Shofukutai Fukuga. In the wild province of Yamato, or very near to its borders, is a beautiful mountain known as Yoshino-yama. It is not only known for its abundance of cherry blossom in the spring, but it is also celebrated in relation to more than one bloody battle. In fact, Yoshino might be called the staging place of historical battles. Many say when in Yoshino, we are walking on history, because Yoshino itself is history. Near Yoshino Mountain lay another, known as Tsubosaka, and between them is the valley of Shimizutani, in which is the Violet Well. At the approach of spring in this tani, or hollow, the grass assumes a perfect emerald green, while moss grows luxuriantly over rocks and boulders. Towards the end of April, great patches of deep purple wild violets show up in the lower parts of the valley, while up the sides, pink and scarlet azaleas grow in a manner which beggars description. Some 30 years ago, a beautiful girl of the age of 17, named Shinge, was wending her way up Shimizutani, accompanied by 4 servants. All were out for a picnic, and all, of course, were in search of wildflowers. O Shinge-san was the daughter of a daimyo who lived in the neighborhood. Every year she was in the habit of having this picnic, and coming to Shimizutani at the end of April to hunt for her favorite flower, the purple violet, sumire. The 5 girls, carrying bamboo baskets, were eagerly collecting flowers, enjoying the occupation as only Japanese girls can. They raced in their rivalry to have the prettiest basketful. There not being so many purple violets as were wanted, O Shinge-san said, "Let us go to the northern end of the valley, where the Violet Well is." Naturally, the girls assented, and off they all ran, each eager to be there first, laughing as they went. O Shinge outran the rest, and arrived before any of them. and, espying a huge bunch of her favourite flowers of the deepest purple and very sweet in smell, she flung herself down, anxious to pick them before the others came. As she stretched out her delicate hand to grasp them, oh, horror! A great mountain snake raised his head from beneath his shady retreat. So frightened was O Shinge-san, she fainted away on the spot. In the meanwhile, the other girls had given up the race, thinking it would please their mistress to arrive first. They picked what they most fancied, chased butterflies, and arrived fully 15 minutes after O Shinge-san had fainted. On seeing her thus laid out on the grass, a great fear filled them that she was dead, and their alarm increased when they saw a large green snake coiled near her head. They screamed, as do most girls amid such circumstances, but one of them, Matsu, who did not lose her head so much as the others, threw her basket of flowers at the snake, which, not liking the bombardment, uncoiled himself and slid away, hoping to find a quieter place. Then all 4 girls bent over their mistress. They rubbed her hands and threw water on her face, but without effect. O Shinge's beautiful complexion became paler and paler, while her red lips assumed the purplish hue that is a sign of approaching death. The girls were heartbroken. Tears coursed down their faces. They did not know what to do, for they could not carry her. What a terrible state of affairs! Just at that moment they heard a man's voice close behind them. ' Do not be so sad. I can restore the young lady to consciousness, if you will allow me.' They turned and saw a remarkably handsome youth standing on the grass not 10 feet away. He appeared as an angel from heaven. Without saying more, the young man approached the prostrate figure of O Shinge, and, taking her hand in his, felt her pulse. None of the servants liked to interfere in this breach of etiquette. He had not asked permission, but his manner was so gentle and sympathetic that they could say nothing. The stranger examined O Shinge carefully, keeping silence. Having finished, he took out of his pocket a little case of medicine, and, putting some white powder from this into a paper, said, ' I am a doctor from a neighbouring village, and I have just been to see a patient at the end of the valley. By good fortune I returned this way, and am able to help you and save your mistress's life. Give her this medicine while I hunt for and kill the snake.' O Matsu-san forced the medicine, along with a little water, into her mistress's mouth, and in a few minutes she began to recover. Shortly after this, the doctor returned, carrying the dead snake on a stick. ' Is this the snake you saw lying by your young mistress ?' he asked. ' Yes, yes,' they cried. ' That is the horrible thing.' ' Then,' said the doctor, ' it is lucky I came, for it is very poisonous, and I fear your mistress would soon have died had I not arrived and been able to give her the medicine. Ah, I see that it is already doing the beautiful young lady good.' On hearing the young man's voice, O Shinge-san sat up. ' Pray, sir, may I ask to whom I am indebted for bringing me thus back to life ?' she asked. The doctor did not answer, but in a proud and manly way contented himself by smiling and bowing low and respectfully after the Japanese fashion, and departed as quietly and unassumingly as he had arrived, disappearing in the sleepy mist which always appears in the afternoons of springtime in the Shimizu Valley. The 4 girls helped their mistress home, but indeed she wanted little assistance, for the medicine had done her much good, and she felt quite recovered. O Shinge's father and mother were very grateful for their daughter's recovery, but the name of the handsome young doctor remained a secret to all except the servant girl, Matsu. For 4 days O Shinge remained quite well, but on the 5th day, for some cause or another, she took to her bed, saying she was sick. She did not sleep, and did not wish to talk, but only to think, and think, and think. Neither father nor mother could make out what her illness was. There was no fever. Doctors were sent for, one after another, but none of them could say what was the matter. All they saw was that she daily became weaker. Asano Zenbai, Shinge's father, was heartbroken, and so was his wife. They had tried everything, and failed to do the slightest good to poor O Shinge. One day Matsu-san craved an interview with Asano Zenbai, who by the by was the head of all his family, a daimyo and great grandee. Zenbai was not accustomed to listen to servants' opinions, but knowing that Matsu was faithful to his daughter and loved her very nearly as much as he did himself, he consented to hear her. And Matsu was ushered into his presence. "Oh, master," said the servant, "if you will let me find a doctor for my young mistress, I can promise to find one who will cure her." "Where on earth will you find such a doctor? Have we not had all the best doctors in the province, and some even from the capital? Where do you propose to look for one?" Matsu answered, "Ah, master, my mistress is not suffering from an illness which can be cured by medicines, not even if they be given by the quart. Nor are doctors of much use. There is, however, one that I know of who could cure her. My mistress's illness is of the heart. The doctor I know of can cure her. It is for love of him that her heart suffers. It has suffered so from the day when he saved her life from the snake bite." Then Matsu told particulars of the adventure at the picnic which had not been told before, for Shinge had asked her servants to say as little as possible, fearing they would not be allowed to go to the Valley of the Violet Well again. "What is the name of this doctor?" asked Asano Zenbai. "And who is he?" "Sir," answered Matsu, "he is Dr. Yoshisawa, a very handsome young man of most courtly manners, but he is of low birth, being only of the Eta." Begin note. The Eta are the lowest people or caste in Japan, skinners and killers of animals. End note. "Please think, master, of my young mistress's burning heart, full of love for the man who saved her life, and no wonder, for he is very handsome and has the manners of a proud samurai. The only cure for your daughter, sir, is to be allowed to marry her lover." Shinge's mother felt very sad when she heard this. She knew well, perhaps by experience, of the illnesses caused by love. She wept and said to Zenbei, "I am quite with you in sorrow, my lord, at the terrible trouble that has come to us, but I cannot see my daughter die thus. Let us tell her we will make inquiries about the man she loves, and see if we can make him our son-in-law. In any case, it is the custom to make full inquiries, which will extend over some days, and in this time our daughter may recover somewhat and get strong enough to hear the news that we cannot accept her lover as our son-in-law." Zenbei agreed to this, and Matsu promised to say nothing to her mistress of the interview. Shinge-san was told by her mother that her father, though he had not consented to the engagement, had promised to make inquiries about Yoshisawa. Shinge took food, and regained much strength on this news, and when she was strong enough, some 10 days later, she was called into her father's presence, accompanied by her mother. "My sweet daughter," said Zenbei, "I have made careful inquiries about Dr. Yoshisawa, your lover. Deeply as it grieves me to say so, it is impossible that I, your father, the head of our whole family, can consent to your marriage with one of so low a family as Yoshisawa, who, in spite of his own goodness, has sprung from the Eta. I must hear no more of it. Such a contract would be impossible for the Asano family." No one ventured to say a word to this. In Japan, the head of a family's decision is final. Poor Shinge bowed to her father and went to her own room, where she wept bitterly, Matsu, the faithful servant, doing her best to console her. Next morning, to the astonishment of the household, Shinge-san could nowhere be found. Search was made everywhere. Even Dr. Yoshisawa joined in the search. On the 3rd day after the disappearance, one of the searchers looked down at the Violet Well and saw poor Shinge's floating body. 2 days later she was buried, and on that day Yoshisawa threw himself into the well. The people say that even now, on wet, stormy nights, they see the ghost of Shinge-san floating over the well, while some declare that they hear the sound of a young man weeping in the valley of Shimizutani. End of Chapter 3. Recording by David McKay. Chapter 4 of Ancient Tales and Folklore of Japan. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David McKay. Ancient Tales and Folklore of Japan by Richard Gordon Smith. Ghost Story of the Flute's Tomb. Told to me by Fukuga. Long ago, at a small and out-of-the-way village called Kumedamura, about 8 miles to the southeast of Sakai City, in Idzumo Province, there was made a tomb, the Fuezuka, or Flute's Tomb, and to this day many people go thither to offer up prayer and to worship, bringing with them flowers and incense sticks, which are deposited as offerings to the spirit of the man who was buried there. All the year round people flock to it. There is no season at which they pray more particularly than at another. The Fuezuka tomb is situated on a large pond called Kumeda, some 5 miles in circumference, and all the places around this pond are known as of Kumeda Pond, from which the village of Kumeda took its name. Whose tomb can it be that attracts such sympathy? The tomb itself is a simple stone pillar, with nothing artistic to recommend it. Neither is the surrounding scenery interesting. It is flat and ugly until the mountains of Kyushu are reached. I must tell, as well as I can, the story of whose tomb it is. Between 70 and 80 years ago, there lived near the pond in the village of Kumedamura a blind ama, or shampooer, called Yoichi. Yoichi was extremely popular in the neighborhood, being very honest and kind, besides being quite a professor in the art of massage, a treatment necessary to almost every Japanese. It would be difficult indeed to find a village that had not its ama. Yoichi was blind, and like all men of his calling, carried an iron wand or stick, also a flute or fuezuka, the stick to feel his way about with, and the flute to let people know he was ready for employment. So good an ama was Yoichi, he was nearly always employed, and consequently fairly well off, having a little house of his own and one servant who cooked his food. A little way from Yoichi's house was a small tea house placed upon the banks of the pond. One evening, April 5th, cherry blossom season, just at dusk, Yoichi was on his way home, having been at work all day. His road led him by the pond. There he heard a girl crying piteously. He stopped and listened for a few moments, and gathered from what he heard that the girl was about to drown herself. Just as she entered the lake, Yoichi caught her by the dress and dragged her out. " Who are you, and why in such trouble as to wish to die ?" he asked. " I am Asayo, the tea-house girl," she answered. " You know me quite well. You must know, also, that it is not possible for me to support myself out of the small pittance which is paid by my master. I have eaten nothing for 2 days now, and am tired of my life." " Come, come," said the blind man. " Dry your tears. I will take you to my house, and do what I can to help you. You are only 25 years of age, and I am told still a fair-looking girl. Perhaps you will marry. In any case, I will take care of you, and you must not think of killing yourself. Come with me now, and I will see that you are well fed and that dry clothes are given you." So Yoichi led Asayo to his home. A few months found them wedded to each other. Were they happy? Well, they should have been, for Yoichi treated his wife with the greatest kindness, but she was unlike her husband. She was selfish, bad-tempered, and unfaithful. In the eyes of Japanese, infidelity is the worst of sins. How much more, then, is it against the country spirit when advantage is taken of a husband who is blind? Some 3 months after they had been married, and in the heat of August, there came to the village a company of actors. Among them was Sawamura Tamataro, of some repute in Asakusa. Asayo, who was very fond of a play, spent much of her time and her husband's money in going to the theatre. In less than 2 days she had fallen violently in love with Tamataro. She sent him money, hardly earned by her blind husband. She wrote to him love letters, begged him to allow her to come and visit him, and generally disgraced her sex. Things went from bad to worse. The secret meetings of Asayo and the actor scandalized the neighborhood, as in most such cases the husband knew nothing about them. Frequently, when he went home, the actor was in his house, but kept quiet, and Asayo let him out secretly, even going with him sometimes. Everyone felt sorry for Yoichi, but none liked to tell him of his wife's infidelity. One day Yoichi went to shampoo a customer who told him of Asayo's conduct. Yoichi was incredulous. "But yes, it is true," said the son of his customer. "Even now the actor Tamataro was with your wife. So soon as you left your house, he slipped in. This he does every day, and many of us see it. We all feel sorry for you in your blindness, and should be glad to help you to punish her." Yoichi was deeply grieved, for he knew that his friends were in earnest. But though blind, he would accept no assistance to convict his wife. He trudged home as fast as his blindness would permit, making as little noise as possible with his staff. On reaching home, Yoichi found the front door fastened from the inside. He went to the back and found the same thing there. There was no way of getting in without breaking a door and making a noise. Yoichi was much excited now, for he knew that his guilty wife and her lover were inside, and he would have liked to kill them both. Great strength came to him, and he raised himself bit by bit until he reached the top of the roof. He intended to enter the house by letting himself down through the temmado. Begin note. Hole in the roof of a Japanese house in place of a chimney. End note. Unfortunately, the straw rope he used in doing this was rotten and gave way, precipitating him below, where he fell on the kinuta. Begin note. A hard block of wood used in stretching cotton cloth. End note. He fractured his skull and died instantly. Asayo and the actor, hearing the noise, went to see what had happened, and were rather pleased to find poor Yoichi dead. They did not report the death until next day, when they said that Yoichi had fallen downstairs and thus killed himself. They buried him with indecent haste, and hardly with proper respect. Yoichi having no children, his property, according to the Japanese law, went to his bad wife, and only a few months passed before Asayo and the actor were married. Apparently they were happy, though none in the village of Kumeda had any sympathy for them, all being disgusted at their behavior to the poor blind shampooer Yoichi. Months passed by without event of any interest in the village. No one bothered about Asayo and her husband, and they bothered about no one else, being sufficiently interested in themselves. The scandal-mongers had become tired, and like all 9-day wonders, the history of the blind ama, Asayo, and Tamataro had passed into silence. However, it does not do to be assured when the spirit of the injured dead goes unavenged. Up in one of the western provinces, at a small village called Minato, lived one of Yoichi's friends who was closely connected with him. This was Okuda Ichibei. He and Yoichi had been to school together. They had promised, when Ichibei went up to the northwest, always to remember each other and to help each other in time of need. And when Yoichi had become blind, Ichibei came down to Kumeda and helped to start Yoichi in his business of ama, which he did by giving him a house to live in, a house which had been bequeathed to Ichibei. Again, fate decreed that it should be in Ichibei's power to help his friend. At that time, news traveled very slowly, and Ichibei had not immediately heard of Yoichi's death, or even of his marriage. Judge, then, of his surprise one night on awaking to find, standing near his pillow, the figure of a man whom by and by he recognized as Yoichi. "Why, Yoichi! I am glad to see you," he said. "But how late at night you have arrived! Why did you not let me know you were coming? I should have been up to receive you, and there would have been a hot meal ready. But never mind. I will call a servant, and everything shall be ready as soon as possible. In the meantime, be seated, and tell me about yourself and how you travelled so far. To have come through the mountains and other wild country from Kumeda is hard enough at best, but for one who is blind, it is wonderful." "I am no longer a living man," answered the ghost of Yoichi, for such it was. "I am indeed your friend Yoichi's spirit, and I shall wander about until I can be avenged for a great ill which has been done me. I have come to beg of you to help me that my spirit may go to rest. If you listen, I will tell my story, and you can then do as you think best." Ichibei was very much astonished, not to say a little nervous, to know that he was in the presence of a ghost, but he was a brave man, and Yoichi had been his friend. He was deeply grieved to hear of Yoichi's death, and realized that the restlessness of his spirit showed him to have been injured. Ichibei decided not only to listen to the story, but also to revenge Yoichi, and said so. The ghost then told all that had happened since he had been set up in the house at Kumedamura. He told of his success as a masseur, of how he had saved the life of Asayo, how he had taken her to his house and subsequently married her, of the arrival of the accursed acting company which contained the man who had ruined his life, of his own death and hasty burial, and of the marriage of Asayo and the actor. "I must be avenged. Will you help me to rest in peace?" he said in conclusion. Ichibei promised. Then the spirit of Yoichi disappeared, and Ichibei slept again. Next morning Ichibei thought he must have been dreaming, but he remembered the vision and the narrative so clearly that he perceived them to have been actual. Suddenly turning with the intention to get up, he caught sight of the shine of a metal flute close to his pillow. It was the flute of a blind amma. It was marked with Yoichi's name. Ichibei resolved to start for Kamedamura and ascertain locally all about Yoichi. In those times, when there was no railway and a rickshaw only here and there, travel was slow. Ichibei took 10 days to reach Kamedamura. He immediately went to the house of his friend Yoichi, and was there told the whole history again, but naturally in another way. Asayo said, "Yes, he saved my life. We were married, and I helped my blind husband in everything. One day, alas, he mistook the staircase for a door, falling down and killing himself. Now I am married to his great friend, an actor called Tamataro, whom you see here." Ichibei knew that the ghost of Yoichi was not likely to tell him lies, and to ask for vengeance unjustly. Therefore he continued talking to Asayo and her husband, listening to their lies, and wondering what would be the fitting procedure. 10 o'clock passed thus, and 11. At 12 o'clock, when Asayo for the 6th or 7th time was assuring Ichibei that everything possible had been done for her blind husband, a windstorm suddenly arose, and in the midst of it was heard the sound of the amma's flute, just as Yoichi played it. It was so unmistakably his that Asayo screamed with fear. At first distant, nearer and nearer approached the sound, until at last it seemed to be in the room itself. At that moment a cold puff of air came down the Temmado, and the ghost of Yoichi was seen standing beneath it, a cold, white, glimmering, and sad-faced wraith. Tamataro and his wife tried to get up and run out of the house, but they found that their legs would not support them, so full were they of fear. Tamataro seized a lamp and flung it at the ghost, but the ghost was not to be moved. The lamp passed through him and broke, setting fire to the house, which burned instantly, the wind fanning the flames. Ichibei made his escape, but neither Asayo nor her husband could move, and the flames consumed them in the presence of Yoichi's ghost. Their cries were loud and piercing. Ichibei had all the ashes swept up and placed in a tomb. He had buried in another grave the flute of the blind amma, and erected on the ground where the house had been a monument sacred to the memory of Yoichi. It is known as Fuezuka no Kwaidan, the Flute Ghost Tomb. End of Chapter 4. Recording by David McKay. Chapter 5 of Ancient Tales and Folklore of Japan. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David McKay. Ancient Tales and Folklore of Japan by Richard Gordon Smith. A haunted temple in Inaba province. Again note: in many stories in manuscript volumes I have told of Shito-dama, or astral spirits. So much evidence have I got from personal acquaintances as to their existence and even frequent occurrence that I almost believe in them myself. Some say that there are two shapes, the roundish oblong tadpole shape and the more square-fronted, eyed shape. Priests declare the shapes and sexes to be all alike, indistinguishable from each other, and square-fronted, as in number 2. My hunter, Oto of Itami, who with his son saw the old barber's wife's Shito-dama after she had died, declared that the shape was like an egg with a tail. At Tsuboune, near Naba, 2 or 3 dozen people who had seen the Shito-dama of a deaf man and that of a fisher girl there declared both to be square-fronted. Again, at Toshishima the old men declared that there was a carpenter whose Shito-dama appeared 5 or 6 times some 15 years ago, and that it was red instead of having the ordinary phosphorescent smoky white appearance. Shito-dama, I take it, is the astral form that a spirit can assume if it wishes to wander the earth after death. This is the story of a dissatisfied spirit which haunted a temple and also showed itself as a ghost. End note. About the year 1680, there stood an old temple on a wild, pine-clad mountain near the village of Kisaichi in the province of Inaba. The temple was far up in a rocky ravine. So high and thick were the trees they kept out nearly all daylight, even when the sun was at its highest. As long as the old men of the village could remember, the temple had been haunted by a Shito-dama and the skeleton ghost, they thought, of some former priestly occupant. Many priests had tried to live in the temple and make it their home, but all had died. No one could spend a night there and live. At last, in the winter of 1701, there arrived in the village of Kisaichi a priest who was on a pilgrimage. His name was Jogen, and he was a native of the province of Kai. Jogen had come to see the haunted temple. He was fond of studying such things, though he believed in the Shito-dama form of spiritual return to earth. He did not believe in ghosts. As a matter of fact, he was anxious to see a Shito-dama, and moreover wished to have a temple of his own. In this wild mountain temple, with a history which fear and death prevented people from visiting, or priests inhabiting, he thought that he had, to put it in vulgar English, a real good thing. Thus he had found his way to the village on the evening of a cold December night, and had gone to the inn to eat his rice and to hear all he could about the temple. Jogen was no coward. On the contrary, he was a brave man, and made all inquiries in the calmest manner. ' Sir,' said the landlord, ' your Holiness must not think of going to this temple, for it means death. Many good priests have tried to stay the night there, and every one has been found next morning dead, or has died shortly after daybreak without coming to his senses. It is no use, sir, trying to defy such an evil spirit as comes to this temple. I beg you, sir, to give up the idea. Badly as we want a temple here, we wish for no more deaths, and often think of burning down this old haunted one and building a new.' Jogen, however, was firm in his resolve to find and see the ghost. ' Kind sir,' he answered, ' your wishes are for my preservation, but it is my ambition to see a Shito-dama, and, if prayers can quiet it, to reopen the temple, to read its legends from the old books that must lie hidden therein, and to be the head priest of it generally.' The innkeeper, seeing that the priest was not to be dissuaded, gave up the attempt, and promised that his son should accompany him as guide in the morning and carry sufficient provisions for a day. Next morning was one of brilliant sunshine, and Jogen was out of bed early, making preparations. Kosa, the innkeeper's 20-year-old son, was tying up the priest's bedding and enough boiled rice to last him nearly 2 full days. It was decided that Kosa, after leaving the priest at the temple, should return to the village, for he, as well as every other villager, refused to spend a night at the weird place. But he and his father agreed to go see Jogen on the morrow, or, as someone grimly put it, to carry him down and give him an honourable funeral and a decent burial. Jogen entered fully into this joke, and shortly after left the village, with Kosa carrying his things and guiding the way. The gorge in which the temple was situated was very steep and wild. Great moss-clad rocks lay strewn everywhere. When Jogen and his companion had got halfway up, they sat down to rest and eat. Soon they heard voices of persons ascending, and ere long the innkeeper and some 8 or 9 of the village elders presented themselves. ' We have followed you,' said the innkeeper, ' to try once more to dissuade you from running to a sure death. True, we want the temple opened and the ghosts appeased, but we do not wish it at the cost of another life. Please consider.' ' I cannot change my mind,' answered the priest. ' Besides, this is the one chance of my life. Your village elders have promised me that if I am able to appease the spirit and reopen the temple, I shall be the head priest of the temple, which must hereafter become celebrated.' Again Jogen refused to listen to advice and laughed at the villagers' fears. Shouldering the packages that had been carried by Kosa, he said, ' Go back with the rest. I can find my own way now easily enough. I shall be glad if you return to morrow with carpenters, for no doubt the temple is in sad want of repairs, both inside and out. Now, my friends, until to morrow, farewell. Have no fear for me. I have none for myself.' The villagers made deep bows. They were greatly impressed by the bravery of Jogen, and hoped that he might be spared to become their priest. Jogen in his turn bowed, and then began to continue his ascent. The others watched him as long as he remained in view, and then retraced their steps to the village, Kosa thanking the good fortune that had not necessitated his having to go to the temple with the priest and return in the evening alone. With 2 or 3 people he felt brave enough, but to be here in the gloom of this wild forest and near the haunted temple alone — no, that was not in his line. As Jogen climbed, he came suddenly in sight of the temple, which seemed to be almost over his head, so precipitous were the sides of the mountain and the path. Filled with curiosity, the priest pressed on, in spite of his heavy load, and some 15 minutes later arrived, panting, on the temple platform or terrace, which, like the temple itself, had been built on driven piles and scaffolding. At first glance, Jogen recognized that the temple was large, but lack of attention had caused it to fall into great dilapidation. Rank grasses grew high about its sides. Fungi and creepers abounded on the damp, sodden posts and supports. So rotten, in fact, did these appear, the priest mentioned in his written notes that evening, that he feared the spirits less than the state of the posts which supported the building. Cautiously Jogen entered the temple, and saw that there was a remarkably large and fine gilded figure of Buddha, besides figures of many saints. There were also fine bronzes and vases, drums from which the parchment had rotted off, incense burners, or koros, and other valuable or holy things. Behind the temple were the priest's living quarters. Evidently, before the ghost's time, the temple must have had some 5 or 6 priests ever present to attend to it and to the people who came to pray. The gloom was oppressive, and as the evening was already approaching, Jogen bethought himself of light. Unpacking his bundle, he filled a lamp with oil, and found temple sticks for the candles which he had brought with him. Having placed one of these on either side of the figure of Buddha, he prayed earnestly for 2 hours, by which time it was quite dark. Then he took his simple meal of rice and settled himself to watch and listen. In order that he might see inside and outside the temple at the same time, he had chosen the gallery. Concealed behind an old column, he waited, in his heart disbelieving in ghosts, but anxious, as his note said, to see a Shito Dama. For some 2 hours he heard nothing. The wind, such little as there was, sighed round the temple and through the stems of the tall trees. An owl hooted from time to time. Bats flew in and out. A fungusy smell pervaded the air. Suddenly, near midnight, Jogen heard a rustling in the bushes below him, as if somebody were pushing through. He thought it was a deer, or perhaps one of the large red-faced apes so fond of the neighbourhood of high and deserted temples. Perhaps even it might be a fox or a badger. The priest was soon undeceived. At the place whence the sound of the rustling leaves had come, he saw the clear and distinct shape of the well-known Shito-dama. It moved first one way and then another in a hovering and jerky manner, and from it a voice, as of distant buzzing, proceeded. But, horror of horrors, what was that standing among the bushes? The priest's blood ran cold. There stood the luminous skeleton of a man in loose priest's clothes, with glaring eyes and a parchment skin. At first it remained still, but as the Shito-dama rose higher and higher, the ghost moved after it, sometimes visible, sometimes not. Higher and higher came the Shito-dama, until finally the ghost stood at the base of the great figure of Buddha and was facing Jogen. Cold beads of sweat stood out on the priest's forehead. The marrow seemed to have frozen in his bones. He shook so that he could hardly stand. Biting his tongue to prevent screaming, he dashed for the small room in which he had left his bedding, and having bolted himself in, proceeded to look through a crack between the boards. Yes, there was the figure of the ghost still seated near the Buddha, but the Shito-dama had disappeared. None of Jogen's senses left him, but fear was paralyzing his body, and he felt himself no longer capable of moving, no matter what should happen. He continued in a lying position to look through the hole. The ghost sat on, turning only its head, sometimes to the right, sometimes to the left, and sometimes looking upwards. For full an hour this went on. Then the buzzing sound began again, and the Shito-dama reappeared, circling and circling round the ghost's body until the ghost vanished, apparently having turned into the Shito-dama, and after circling round the holy figures 3 or 4 times, it suddenly shot out of sight. Next morning, Kosa and 5 men came up to the temple. They found the priest alive, but paralyzed. He could neither move nor speak. He was carried to the village, dying before he got there. Much use was made of the priest's notes. No one else ever volunteered to live at the temple, which 2 years later was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. In digging among the remains, searching for bronzes and metal Buddhas, villagers came upon a skeleton buried only a foot deep, near the bushes whence Jogen had first heard the sounds of rustling. Undoubtedly the ghost and Shito-dama were those of a priest who had suffered a violent death and could not rest. The bones were properly buried and masses said, and nothing has since been seen of the ghost. All that remains of the temple are the moss-grown pedestals which formed the foundations. End of Chapter 5. Recording by David McKay.
And that's the last one for today. Thanks for coming by, Pasta Babe. I appreciate it. Sorry it's a short one today. Tuesday, I always get my tea days mixed up for some reason. Tuesday night, probably do another 4 stories. A carp gives a lesson in perseverance. Legends told by a fisherman on a lake. A miraculous sword and the procession of ghosts. On Tuesday. Thanks for coming by, though. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. Rewind. The stories were pretty good. I don't know why women are always the bad guys. Yeah, enough to drive you nuts, hey? So, thanks again, and have a wonderful day. Bye.